Have you ever come home after a stressful day with the overwhelming feeling of something hanging over your head? You desperately want to focus on something else, so you pick up a controller. You start playing a game on your console or PC, but after 10 minutes, it hits you. For some inexplicable reason, you're not having fun. What you were depending on to relieve stress is boring or just feels like work. Whatever the reason, this routine just doesn't feel particularly rewarding anymore. But you paid for the console and the 11 games that you have on it, so you feel obligated to keep playing, even though it's not very fun. And fun is the reason you started playing video games in the first place, isn't it? So how did you find yourself in this strange place where you play more out of obligation than joy? Have video games become less enjoyable? Or even worse, have you changed in a way that prevents you from having fun? To understand if either of these changes is true, we have to ask an even more fundamental question. What is fun exactly? It's a concept that we take for granted when we talk about video games, but it isn't as obvious as you may think. What we call fun could be broken down into other descriptors and be more accurate. When we say something is fun, it might simply mean that we get pleasure from it. It might also refer to how hours fly by when we do it. It could be about the flow state that we sometimes find ourselves in, where we exist in the moment, unbothered by the outside world. We are not thinking about ourselves or even how we're performing. All of our mental attention is focused on a single activity. Fun could be a combination of some or all of these things that make us reflect on an activity in a very positive way. In this sense, it doesn't refer to a specific type of experience, but an overall evaluation. In their 2019 book, Fun, Taste, and Games, authors John Sharp and David Thomas describe fun as a form of play. We set aside outside expectations of utility, efficiency, and expediency to enter it. We accept the rules of irrelevance. We also put aside certain social and cultural concepts while playing. In this world, these things just aren't as important. Fun also involves things that are half real. In play, we can pretend to do things, such as driving a car like a complete maniac, but we're not putting the pedal to the metal in reality. We're speeding and swerving in play. Now, it doesn't always have to refer to play. After all, we can have fun going out for dinner with our friends, but when we're talking about video games, it pretty much always does. That's why we say we're playing video games. We're entering a half-real world. There are elements that reflect reality while many depart from it. There are graphics and actions that are real, but the world we are expected to inhabit is not. This should remind you of kids playing pretend, but also how we engage with video games. We're putting aside our reality outside of the game to play. We take what we're doing half seriously so that we're engaged with it, but don't confuse it for having real-life consequences. Problems sometimes happen when we take everything too seriously. We can get mad while we're hours into a board game, or when we slam a controller against a coffee table in a moment of frustration. Games can have real consequences, like when teams compete in esports, but those consequences are from winning or losing, not from a character being killed. That is, unless you entered a real-life Squid Game, of course. We find many different things fun in play. Some of us love the social element and prefer always playing with others. These are people who stick to board games, role-playing games, or maybe even video games with local multiplayer. Let's look at Dungeons & Dragons, one of the better examples of a social game. While the Dungeon Master is responsible for a lot of the quest building, everyone playing has to buy into the imagined reality to keep the game alive. Without participation, the activity just doesn't exist. It requires you to keep track of numerous storylines and quest details while demanding that you improvise in character. It's about as good as a game of pretend can get. Some people even take great joy in breaking games. That ranges from cheating to exploiting mechanics to gain a considerable advantage. This is often used to complete speedruns. That's where you're trying to beat a game in record time. This is all about embracing the process as a public spectacle, where you can achieve glory in the best completion time. Esports exist for a similar reason. They've elevated specific games to a level of sport where competitions are held on a professional level. These competitors have made play their job, which for some may make video games no longer fun. Gamers often grind in role-playing games or take on punishing games in the Souls-like genre. They think of the pain and frustration as contributing to an overall sense of satisfaction. When they triumph over a really difficult boss, they get a very powerful feeling of reward, and this is how they prefer to have fun in games. The intense struggle heightens the feeling of accomplishment. Most of us enjoy the sense of progress we get from games. They are fair in the way that they usually have clearly defined rules, and you are rewarded for accomplishing tasks. It's like a fantasy version of the real world that's clearer, more fair, and reliably rewarding. In the real world, it can be a struggle to derive a meaningful sense of accomplishment. In most work, rewards and accomplishments are reserved for decision makers. The staff that do the tangible work simply perform their tasks and move on. Even when they're working on a longer form project, once it ends, they just move on to the next one. The boss takes home the trophy and the higher salary, while you check your workforce management software for the next line item to check off. You may do good work, but you won't necessarily find yourself moving up a rung on the corporate ladder. Decision makers speak a secret language, and they promote people who speak it back to them. Now, I'm getting a bit conspiratorial here, but the point is that there are many reasons beyond meritocracy that people can get ahead. Overall, work often isn't fair. There's no direct line from hard work to financial success and self-fulfillment either. Someone who has the means to buy and sell stocks can make more than you will in your entire life by clicking a few boxes and entering some numbers in their trading app. Someone who is wealthier can also freely pursue their interests. They can start a business or buy one in an industry that they want to explore. The paths to self-fulfillment are more open to them, as if they're using a game genie while you're stuck on expert mode. For our younger gamers, game genies were a physical cartridge that you used to cheat at a game. But in the world of a video game, your work, which is actually fun, pays off. You level up your character, build up your skills as a warrior, and you'll defeat the boss sooner or later. Roll credits. Wouldn't it be wonderful if life was structured in the same way, with clear goals that you could accomplish? Life could be fun, a lot like the game of life, although to be fair, that was still a bit random and chaotic. The goals in video games allow many of us to get invested in the play. Open sandboxes can be interesting to experiment with when we start, but we quickly get bored with them. We may find it entertaining to goof around in Grand Theft Auto, for example, but unless we take the missions seriously, we won't return to that world very often. We often know when we like a video game because we feel compelled to return to it again, but what we find compelling is subjective, much like what we find fun. When we feel the joy of a video game, we live in the moment. We're not consciously aware of the past or anticipating the future outside of what's happening directly in front of us. We are invested in the reality of play. It's not exactly a Zen experience, but it is satisfying and absorbing, a flow experience. Fun in video games isn't one specific thing. It is one or multiple elements coming together in play, and that combination is different for everybody. Some titles and genres work for large audiences. The combination of elements of play manages to satisfy a lot of different people. But among the same large audience, you probably don't have many people with the exact same sense of what fun is in a video game. When you consider a long-running gaming franchise, everyone has their favorite, along with one or more they despise. With the newer open-world Zelda games, fans largely love the series' new direction, while a minority hated how far the more recent releases departed from its familiar gameplay. There's no pleasing everyone. We all have a different sense of fun. There are also the gamers who like challenging Souls-like games, but this subgenre can be off-putting for others. The extreme difficulty and frustration are not fun for them. They don't like these unpleasant emotions in their play. Management sims give you the joy and satisfaction of creating your own town or theme park, but they can also be stressful, resembling work-like scenarios. That can be off-putting for those who want to get as far away as possible from their work life while playing video games. This is ultimately to say that we derive pleasure in different ways. So when we say that we don't find video games fun anymore, we have to consider all the different things that have changed. We all have different conceptions of what's fun when we sit down with a controller in hand. Then there are those who no longer find pleasure in any of this because their idea of fun has changed as they age. It may be more challenging for some of us to get invested in the play of the game world as we get older. A big reason may be that we can no longer tap into the flow experience. Our real-life responsibilities distract us and make the worlds that we can explore in series like GTA and Zelda too trivial by comparison. We just can't buy into them anymore. The flow experience concept might also be compromised for the same reason you struggle to sit through a movie. Your phone cries out like a siren, beckoning you to check out every update from social media or learn about upcoming releases. This type of person often ends up watching others play video games on Twitch and YouTube, essentially playing vicariously through them. Rather than something taking their entire focus, it becomes just another stream to watch. They can also see what individuals are saying about the game and the streamer's channel at the same time. It makes them feel connected, even if it's only by viewing the same thing others are watching at that same moment. This passive gamer might not find video games fun anymore because they don't actually play. How enjoyable could it possibly be to watch others have fun on your behalf? It's also possible that being isolated from other real people in a fantasy world isn't your cup of tea to begin with. For some of us, the true value of playing video games was, and maybe still is, the in-person social experience. You remember the times you played multiplayer in the same room with your friends after school. This bonding and play were truly memorable. And now, as an adult, the opportunity to play with a friend just doesn't happen very often. When it does, you may find that something is missing. You're just not able to take the experience seriously enough to really enjoy it. Video games can be a sad reminder of the part of you that is lost forever. You were once a person who joyfully spent time playing with their friends or siblings, and now gaming no longer fulfills this desire, nor is it interesting to you. You converse with them or alleviate stress, which is a great thing, but gone is the art of playing together. You and your friends have taken the traditional role of adults seriously. You no longer play. Sure, there are online options, but those don't seem to put an emphasis on the social aspect as much anymore. There are still massive multiplayer online franchises like World of Warcraft, where you live a second life connected almost intimately with others through your computer. But this has become less relevant. Games like Call of Duty and Fortnite that emphasize encounters with random people are more popular and culturally relevant. A sense of community has grown in video game land. You can find groups on Facebook, Discord, and Reddit. Users of these platforms discuss releases, complaints, crowdsourcing, and meeting up to play one another. It's a way to find like-minded players and to feel connected socially whether or not you're busy slaying monsters. It's a bit like how you would discuss games with your friends during recess. Participating in these kinds of groups isn't for everyone. They can have trolls and other antagonizing individuals, but they can still be a nice way to feel connected. If gaming communities are alienating to you, then games in general might not fit into the fun category. You could have an underlying sense of not being welcome, even though you're playing a single-player game. Having a feeling of belonging is especially important with online games. No one wants to feel like an outcast while they're trying to have fun in their spare time. The social side of gaming is complex and multi-layered, but much of the video game world is still focused on single-player experiences that don't require the participation of anyone else. Recent issues with these games may be contributing to your overall sense that video games are no longer what they used to be when it comes to their fun factor. A consensus has formed that what are referred to as AAA games have become stagnant. These games have big budgets behind them, but take few risks. The result is that they just feel like more of the same. One genre guilty of this is story-driven action-adventure games. These continue to get the most production and marketing cash, while we, as an audience, become less able to feel their impact. This isn't to say that some gamers can't be satisfied by returning to the same type of game repeatedly, but others require novelty for that sense of fun. A recent study on self-determination in psychology suggests that when our need for novelty is fulfilled, our overall sense of satisfaction with life improves. Video game experiences that lack novelty are bound to impact how we enjoy them. However, this need for novelty varies from person to person. Some people seem content with what is colloquially called comfort food. Games with repetitive gameplay often fall into this category. When you experience something rewarding over and over again, those good feelings start to erode with time. The dopamine response slowly dulls when the brain is repeatedly exposed to the same reward trigger. How it works is that when you expect a reward from an activity, our brain starts producing dopamine. This excitement prompts us to engage with the activity more. It's likely why so many of us keep returning to video games. They give us a dopamine response when we pursue that glowing chest at the end of the level. While playing for a prolonged period, our brain is flooded with large dopamine responses. To maintain balance, it will shut down our ability to receive dopamine from the same activity. Gamers often respond by playing even more to get the same good feelings. The brain, in turn, shuts down even more dopamine responses. This can lead to an overall dopamine deficiency, making it hard to find those good feelings from anything. While overexposure to video games has happened since they first gained widespread popularity, a recent trend has made the problem much worse. It has encouraged marathon gaming sessions like nothing witnessed before and annihilated a sense of novelty. It's not any specific game, but a genre with a different monetization model. I'm referring to live service games. Game companies have always wanted your attention. Traditionally, they've done this by periodically offering different experiences. You buy a game, play it, and beat it. When another game of interest comes out, you play it. And you would also go back and play old games when you wanted to re-experience them. Online games began to disrupt this cycle when they first became popular, but they didn't occupy the entirety of playtime. Gamers would regularly return to online games like Counter-Strike and Left 4 Dead, but they typically didn't shun other games entirely. Live service games are not worlds apart from their online predecessors. Some of them came from online gaming worlds, such as Call of Duty, although it's more accurately a foot in both worlds. They are also borrowing a page from the social media handbook, using predatory engagement psychology to capture as much attention as possible. Like social media, many of the franchises that fall under this umbrella are technically free. In the gaming world, they're known as free-to-play live service games. Where social media platforms make money by serving you ads, live service monetization comes in the form of microtransactions and subscriptions. To get you to spend more money on either, developers use a range of tactics. One strategy used is appealing to your need to establish your identity. With social media, we've been creating our identity online by building profiles. We curate parts of our lives to make them public. We have an idea of how we want to present ourselves and use images, videos, and writing to share ourselves with others. Live service games prey on our desire to establish an identity. They ask you to purchase cosmetic items to distinguish yourself from others, much like you would use photos on Facebook or clothes in real life. You can usually earn these items by playing, but it's much faster to buy your way into appearing unique. There are often items that can only be obtained by making a purchase, remaining out of reach for anyone who doesn't want to open up their wallet. Some live service games require you to pay to be competitive. They tie your sense of accomplishment and skill to a monetary transaction. In a way, this method appeals to those who find joy in cheating. Paying to succeed undermines the fairness of the game. They also encourage you to keep at it via subscription. The most popular version of this is called the Battle Pass, and most notably can be found in the game Fortnite. You feel obligated to play because you're paying for it like a utility. You regularly receive rewards to allow you to look unique. Underlying all of these manipulative tactics to keep your attention is a very safe style of gameplay. These games are typically not very innovative. Battle Royale in Fortnite felt fresh at the time of release, but the overall concept is not original. PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, now known as PUBG Battlegrounds, had already popularized the game mode. Fortnite added a building mechanic as a differentiator and likely succeeded because its competitors were not free at the time of release. Other free-to-play games similarly take a successful model and make it available at no charge. The gameplay is relatively simple in nature, doomed to become dull for those who crave novelty. For players who need even more dopamine hits, live service games have devised another dubious tactic: loot boxes. This is where you spend money to get a random perk or item. They can range from something mundane that serves almost no purpose to an incredibly rare item. Loot boxes are essentially a form of gambling, giving kids of all ages the same high you get from winning at the casino. Some countries have made loot boxes illegal because studies have suggested that they are a gateway to gambling. This brings us back to how your brain handles all of this. Your dopamine response weakens from the excessive, redundant gameplay, yet you still feel obligated to keep playing. You've invested time and money into your profile, and in some cases, your social connections. You also have that Battle Pass subscription you've invested in that demands your attention to make it feel worth the cost. You end up playing a game past the point of it being fun. You were hooked for other reasons than that original joy that likely brought you to it in the first place. You're stuck chasing the dopamine highs, hooked by a subscription, and getting little blips of joy from a loot box. Calling this addict behavior almost seems too obvious at this point. I've painted a pretty gloomy picture of modern video games, but I do have something important to confess. I still find video games fun, very fun. I've been playing for decades, and I enjoy them now almost as much as ever. Many years ago, I decided to reject the titles that were causing me more grief than joy. I pinpointed the exact quality that bothered me more than anything else. It was games that overwhelmed me with a sense of obligation. When I feel that draw to come back to a game I don't love to begin with, I know something is off. There's an extra pressure I don't want in my life. At the time, it was an online game that had a ranking system. I didn't want my rank to drop, so I would feel compelled to return most nights. I dabbled in free-to-play games, but found the overall experiences they offered disappointing and was put off by the manipulative tactics to keep me coming back. What I do now is play less and try different genres. I find genres I love in the indie game world or among bigger developers who take on interesting, new, outside-the-box approaches. I also play Nintendo games that never embrace these modern, attention-grabbing strategies, and I still occasionally play the big title games after a long enough time. If you want to keep having fun with video games, you have to step back from playing the same one or genre repeatedly. Explore other genres. Discover a new definition of what fun is for you. You may be surprised. And you may also have to take a step back in general. Take time away from consoles and handheld devices. When you keep a healthy balance of activities and hobbies, the dopamine response that you get from video games will remain relatively stable. You'll still be able to enjoy them if you're the kind of person who can still find joy in them. Alright, now I'm about to humble myself by quoting something that is a staple of what some consider to be flaky spiritual memes. If you love something, set it free. If it comes back, it's yours. If it doesn't, it was never yours. Sadly, this rings true when it comes to video games. Taking a step back will help you recalibrate your brain's dopamine response. And if that sense of fun doesn't come back, it's time to move on. For now.